Davis, Dickinson, Donnelly, Ing, Fior, Fletcher, Fong, Fuentes, Furutani, Galgiani, Garrick, Gatto, Gordon, Gorell, Grove, Hagman, Halderman, Hall, Harkey, Hayashi, Hernandez, Hill, Huber, Weso, Huffman, Jeffries, Jones, Knight, Lara, Logue, Lowenthal, Ma, Mansour, Mendoza, Miller, Mitchell, Monning, Morrell, Nestande, Nilsson, Norby, Olson, Pan, Perea, V. Manuel Perez, Portantino, Silva, Skinner, Smythe, Solorio, Swanson, Torres, Valadeo, Wagner, Wykowski, Williams, Yamada, Mr. Speaker.
A quorum is present. We ask our guests and visitors in the rear of the chamber and in the gallery to please stand for the prayer. We ask our Assembly Chaplain, Father Constantine Papadimos, to offer the day's prayer.
Good afternoon. Let us pray. Lord, the word hypocrite is actually a Greek word for actor. Hypocrites act so as to appear a certain way in public only. Help us, Lord, to be the opposite. Help us to be constantly vigilant, not to focus on the appearance of holiness, but to strive toward holiness in our life without drawing attention to ourselves. Guide us to ensure that our outward appearance and behavior become unspectacular, while the reality of our personal spiritual growth, while unseen, becomes profound. Amen.
We ask our guests and visitors to remain standing and join us for the flag salute. Please join Assembly Member Block as he leads us in the pledge. Mr. Block. You may be seated. Reading of the previous day's journal.
Assembly Chamber, Sacramento, March 3rd, 2011. The Assembly met at 9 a.m. Honorable Female Ma, Speaker Pro Tem of the Assembly, presiding. Chief Clerk E. Dawson Wilson at the desk. Reading color Timothy Moore. The reading. The roll was called.
Mr. Calderon moves. Ms. Conway seconds that the reading of the previous day's journal be dispensed with. Presentations of petitions. There are none. Introduction and reference of bills will be deferred. Reports of committees will be deemed read and amendments deemed adopted. Messages from the governor. There are none. Messages from the Senate. There are none. Motions and resolutions. The absences for the day will be deemed read and printed in the journal. Mr. Calderon.
Yes, Madam Speaker and members, I request unanimous consent to suspend Assembly Rule 45.5 to allow Assembly Members Davis and Portantino to speak on adjourn in memory today.
Without objection.
Also, pursuant to Rule 96, I request unanimous consent to re-refer AB 309 by Mr. Cook from the Judiciary Committee to the Local Government Committee.
Without objection.
And finally, pursuant to Rule 96, I request unanimous consent to re-refer AB 561 by Mr. Gurrell from the Water Parks and Wildlife Committee to the Local Government Committee.
Without objection. We will recess the regular session for the purpose of convening the first extraordinary session. Without objection, we will substitute the prayer, pledge, other opening procedures in the regular session for those items in the first extraordinary session. We are in the first extraordinary session. We have one bill on third reading authored by Mr. V. Manuel Perez, ready to be taken up. File item 1, AB 1X13. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 13 by Assembly Member V. Manuel Perez, an act relating to renewable energy resources, and making appropriation therefore.
Mr. V. Manuel Perez.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This measure is one of 4 bills that make up the Assembly and Senate Clean Energy Jobs Initiative that seeks to expedite the siting and permitting of utility-scale renewable energy generation in the state of California. One of the key policies of this package is a 33% renewable portfolio standard, which aims to ensure a California market for utility-scale renewable energy technologies. If the state is to reach its goal of 33% RPS by 2020, it is imperative that statutory direction be provided that ensures expeditious permit approvals in the prime renewable resource areas of the state, while also ensuring that the appropriate habitat and species mitigation takes place. Last year, SB 8X34 by Senator Padilla sought to strike this balance by initiating a natural community conservation plan in the Colorado and Mojave Desert regions, also referred to as the Desert Renewable Energy Conservation Plan. Eligible technologies to the DRECP were limited to solar photovoltaic and solar thermal technologies. Currently, there are no other administrative proceedings underway to pursue similar plans in other parts of the state that are ripe for utility-scale renewable energy projects, such as the San Joaquin Valley. AB 1X13 seeks to provide this additional statutory direction for the San Joaquin Valley, raises the additional revenue needed to permit applications quickly through a developer fee that the renewable energy industry has agreed to pay, and expands eligible technologies to wind and geothermal in the Desert Renewable Energy Conservation Plan. I want to underscore that the statutory direction for the natural community conservation plans in the San Joaquin Valley is permissive and not a state mandate. Thus, this element of the bill will be pursued only if it is deemed appropriate and within the bounds of fiscal prudency for the agencies. The above referenced language can be found in Section 4, Fish and Game Code Section 2840A, to the extent practicable, which is on page 13 of the bill. This language addresses the fiscal prudency concerns brought forth by many of my Republican colleagues in appropriations. As well, during the committee process, a few Republican colleagues raised appropriate questions about the application of the $75,000 fee and the formula by which the Department of Fish and Game came to that number. I committed to following up with DFG, and I met with them late last week. The revenue deriving from the $75,000 is aimed to specifically cover the staffing cost of processing permit applications in light of the Department of Fish and Game's need for additional staff capacity to expedite such a significant paper load. They estimated the cost of committing one full-time employee per permit application and simply cut that amount in half. The Republican consultant and Assembly Natural Resources Committee noted this formula and offered amendments, which I accepted, that would ensure the collection of this fee in an amount that does not exceed the anticipated full cost of the permit processing activities if the cost should fall below $75,000. In other words, a developer could pay less. In closing, there is bipartisan support, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote so that good projects are built sooner and jobs can be created more quickly.
Okay, seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 54, noes 11. Measure passes. The first extraordinary session is recessed. Upon call of the Speaker, we are back in the regular session. Business on the daily file. Second reading. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 125 with amendments.
All bills will be deemed read and amendments deemed adopted. We are now in Assembly third reading. File item 3, H.R. 6. Clerk will read.
House Resolution 6 by Assemblymember Hall relative to Problem Gambling Awareness Week.
Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. H.R. 6 recognizes the week of March 6 as National Problem Gaming Awareness Week and commends the individuals and organizations that bring awareness and treatment on the issue. As you all know, gambling is a form of entertainment for many in California, the second largest gaming state in the nation in terms of gross revenues. With that, we must also recognize that there is a potential negative side to gambling that deeply impacts individuals, their families, and society as a whole. Thank you. Members, I ask that you join me in recognizing this important week and request that the roll be open for co-authors. I respectfully ask for your aye vote on H.R. 6.
Seeing no further questions or debate, Mr. Hall asks for the first roll to be open for co-authors. The first roll will be open for co-authors. Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Let the record show that there are 67 co-authors. We can take a voice vote on this item. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The measure is adopted. File item 4, SCR 9. Clerk will read.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 9 by Senator Rubio relative to Fresno Food Expo.
Mr. Perez.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. SCR 9 declares March 11, 2011 Fresno Food Expo Day. The central San Joaquin Valley is one of the world's most productive agricultural regions. It's home to hundreds of food producers, growers, manufacturers, processors, winemakers, and brewers, reflecting its rich cultural diversity. In 2009, Fresno County alone had an agricultural production of $5.37 billion. Fresno County's Economic Development Report estimates that overall food industry in the central San Joaquin Valley generated approximately $41 billion in 2009. On March 11th, the city of Fresno will be hosting its inaugural Fresno Food Expo. This expo is a unique event that provides a forum for producers to market their products and celebrate the wonderful agriculture goods produced in the valley. This event is designed to promote one of our largest export-oriented industries in California and will hopefully become an annual event that will produce economic development opportunities for the agriculture and food production communities of the Central Valley. Please join me in declaring March 11th, 2011 as Fresno Food Expo Day and honoring the Central San Joaquin Valley for its abundant production of agricultural goods. I respectfully ask to open the roll for co-authors, and I ask for your aye vote on SCR 9. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions or debate, the first roll will be open for co-authors. Mr. Perea is asking for co-authors. Members, first roll open for co-authors. Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. For the record, there are 69 co-authors. We can take a voice vote on this item. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The measure is adopted. We have a couple of guests here on the floor. We have Treasurer Bill Lockyer. Welcome to the floor, Treasurer Lockyer. We also have former Assembly member Mary Salas. Mary? And I did see former Assembly member Barbara Matthews. I don't know if Barbara Matthews is still on the floor. Welcome to the floor, Ms. Matthews. Okay, Mr. Knight, for what purpose do you rise?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To introduce one of my staff members who is visiting us here from God's country, from Palmdale, Lancaster. Mrs. Sarah Tyndall is in the back.
Okay, members, we will move to requests in memory. Request to adjourn in memory. The following members were previously granted permission to speak on an adjourn in memory today: Mr. Davis and Mr. Portantino. Mr. Portantino.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. As most of you know, I very rarely rise during adjourn in memories. I typically put them in the record and send the note to the family. This one, though, Richard Paul DeGray, 1919 to 2010, was a person that did so much for our country, and he educated me on a particular facet of American history. One day I asked him what he did during World War II, assuming that so many members of his generation had fought overseas, and he took me aside and he said, you know, there were many of us who stayed home and played another important role. In Mr. DeGray's case, that was working for 50 years at Lockheed, and I want to give you a little example of some of the projects and a little bit about Mr. DeGray. Dick was born in Salt Lake City in 1919, just after the end of World War I. He was an only child and raised by his loving mother, Goldie. In 1927, at the age of 8, Dick and a couple of his friends walked 3 miles without Goldie's permission to see Charles Lindbergh and the Spirit of St. Louis. In Dick's words, that experience piqued a great interest in airplanes and flying that never abated. Following graduation from high school and a year at the University of Utah, Dick decided to leave Utah for Glendale, California, to seek a career in aeronautical engineering. After 2 intensive years of study at Curtis Wright Technical Institute, Dick passed the aero engineering course in 1938 and was hired the next day by Lockheed in Burbank. After rising to lead a group of 22 design engineers at the end of World War II, he became an integral part of the famed Skunk Works group headed by Kelly Johnson. He was involved with designing aircraft and a program manager, including the P-38 Lightning, the P-80 Shooting Star, the F-104 Starfighter, the famed U-2, the YF-12-8, and the SR-71 Blackbird and the F-117 stealth bomber in his 50-year career. Dick served his entire life and gave his unending support to the Glendale and La Cañada Methodist churches. He had a kind heart and believed in serving and took pleasure from serving where he felt he could help. And that was one of his lines, where he felt he could help. He served for decades in the Methodist Church, the Kiwanis Club, which is where I first met him. He walked up to me one day and he said, "Who are you, this young Democrat from New Jersey who just joined my Kiwanis Club?" And I thought he was looking me up and down and was sizing me up. And he went on to get to be my friend and actually decided he wanted to be a campaign photographer. And as he was getting down when one of my re-elections for the city council, I was afraid he was going to fall off a cliff because we were in a park taking campaign photos, and he was in his 90s trying to take these pictures. And he became a very good close friend and mentor. Dick will be missed for not forgetting, Dick will be missed but not forgotten by his friends and family. He will always be remembered for his warm heart, smile, positive attitude, willingness to get the job done, his creativity and good nature. He always said you can do anything if you work hard enough at it, and he liked to say that to all of us. He lived by this motto for over 90 years, and he was married to Shirley DeGray for 67 years. So it's my honor to ask us to adjourn our legislative session in the honor of Richard DeGray. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Can we have a little attention during the adjourned memories? Okay, Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Today I rise in the memory of Audrey Quarles. Mrs. Quarles was born on April the 11th, 1918, and of course she passed on February 17th, and her funeral was a week ago, and she was 93 years old. She was known as being everywhere. She was a community activist. Mrs. Quarles was married for 36 years to Henry Quarles. She originally came from Houston, Texas, where she attended Texas Southern University. She was involved in her sorority, Zeta Phi Beta, and she was known for being extremely involved in numerous activities in our communities, from being a member of what we call the National and Los Angeles Urban Leagues, a group that worked with different businesses and corporations to provide jobs and economic opportunities, to Black Women's Forum Group, to the National Council of Negro Women, to the National Association of University Women. She valued public education and voter education. Also, Mrs. Quarles was a member of the renowned Second Baptist Church in Los Angeles, and she was extremely active in the 48th Assembly District Caucus for 25 years. I happened to have met her when I served as a chief for the 35th Congressional District. During that time, I worked with then Congresswoman Maxine Waters, where she was also active in the South Los Angeles community. Mrs. Quarles has 5 children, and also her stepson, who is attorney Billy Mills Jr., has been very involved in her life. She will be remembered not only for her community activism in general, but specifically for working in the efforts to get people elected, many of whom are on this floor today. And I have to say that she came by my office back in 2006 and helped that effort as well. And so many of us are responsible for the work that Mrs. Quarles did for others. And I respectfully ask, Madam Speaker, that we adjourn in her outstanding example she left throughout her life of the importance of activism. And I agree that her life is certainly a shining example to all Californians that we can each make a difference.
Mr. Bradford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I, too, join my colleague, Mr. Davis, in recognizing the life of Miss Audrey Quarles, better known as Gigi, to her kids and grandkids. And as Mr. Davis stated, is an individual who lived the ripe age of 93 years of age, and up until almost her last day, she was still very much involved in the community in which she loved so much. She spent 35 years of her life as a teacher at the LA Unified School District and was one of the first African Americans to integrate LA Unified School District as a teacher. And her life, as stated, was a life of integrity, a life of purpose, a life of love, but most importantly, a life of hope and encouragement for people like myself. And though Mrs. Quarles lived in Los Angeles, I was deeply moved a number of years ago. At the age of 90, I walked into my campaign office, and over in the corner, there was Mrs. Quarles with a phone to her ear, snacks in front of her, and dialing for Steve Bradford. And my first introduction to politics in L.A. Was through the NAACP some 30 years ago. And it was Mrs. Quarles, as a member of the executive board, who gave me encouragement and asked me to explore a life in politics, but first a life of involvement and community commitment and giving back. So I'm honored to ask this body to adjourn in a memory of a woman who was a great leader, a great supporter, a great friend, a mentor, and a mother to all, and a member of Zeta Phi Beta sorority, my sister organization of Phi Beta Sigma, the only legitimate brother-sister Greek organization in the black fraternity. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Please bring the names to the desk to be printed in the journal. Okay, the session schedule is as follows. Tuesday, March 8th, check-in session and floor session upon call of the Speaker. Wednesday, March 9th, check-in session and floor session upon call of the Speaker. Thursday, March 10th, floor session at 9 a.m. And Friday, March 11th, floor session upon call of the Speaker. All other items remaining will be passed and retained. All motions shall be continued. I'm ready to entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Calderon moves. Mr. Hagman seconds that this House stands adjourned until Thursday, March 10th at 9 a.m. Quorum call is lifted. See you.
Microphone on, huh? Assemblyman Mike